Hi, this is Shane Ivey with Arc Dream Publishing and Delta Green.
Hey everybody, this is John. This is episode, I think, 58. I forgot already. I should have wrote it down. We have with us tonight Shane Ivey. How you doing tonight, Shane?
I'm great, thank you.
That's good. I guess we'll kick this thing off as I remember. We'll do our something cool segment. So, you have anything cool that's been going on for the last week or two?
Yeah, well, with Arc Dream in particular, it's really great that we've got our game Puppet Land is at the printer, and John Tynes, the author, and I have gone over proofs and sent corrections and gotten confirmation that they've been handled. So at long last, that game is actually in production and coming out. So I'm really excited about that in a kind of exhausted, when is the pain going to end kind of a way. And so that's definitely cool. And then and what else? I'm having a lot of fun with I've started running Aces and Eights again, and that's a Western role-playing game by Kinzer and Company that I could talk about for ages because it's just kind of fascinating. But and that's really fun. I've been running that for the past few weeks again, a new campaign of that, and it's a game that I've run for years and years off and on, and it's always hugely successful. Like all of my friends, no matter what their predilections are with different kinds of games, they tend to just absolutely fall in love when we're playing that game. So that's been a lot of fun.
Cool.
And, yeah. So lots of cool stuff going on.
And the Aces and Eights, it breaks down the combat into like fractions of seconds. Is that correct?
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. It's funny. My friend John Marin and I first got the game out of curiosity because we both kind of liked the genre, but we picked it up when it first came out in 2007, I think, years and years ago, and started looking through it. And our first reaction was just like, we just were laughing because it's so detailed and crunchy. It's like completely the wrong kind of game. We figured this is just going to be ridiculous, so we'll give it a try just because, we love to experiment and see what's what. But we just thought it was the craziest thing we'd ever seen. And as soon as we played it for a little while, we were just absolutely hooked. It winds up, the way it plays out is so suspenseful, and the way that the rules kind of hang together, they do a fantastic job of kind of delivering the genre that it's setting out to deliver. So and I've played a lot of different Western games, and far and away, this has been my favorite. So it's a lot of fun.
I guess, have you played Deadlands then?
Yeah, ages and ages ago. And I know I think they kind of switched over to Savage Worlds for what they're doing with Deadlands now, unless I'm totally talking out of my butt and wrong. I don't know, but and yeah, and I've played a lot of Savage Worlds, and it's pretty fun. It's kind of it's not my favorite thing in the world for a lot of reasons. I feel like for my tastes, there's kind of too much kind of player decision making in resource management going on at the table, and it winds up feeling a little too gamey in a way, a little too board gamey for me. But I mean, what do I know? It's a wildly popular game, and I've played it plenty and had a great time doing it, But while I'm kind of thinking in terms of what I like about game rules and don't like about game rules, I guess that's where that is. But yeah. So
not a big fan of fourth edition then.
Oh, D&D. Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate and despise it, which is like so many people seem to. But yeah, it felt like kind of playing a board game and then tacking role playing onto it, And we played it for a long time. I ran a lot of it and played in games, and I don't know. Everybody likes different things, and that one was kind of was kind of middling. I didn't hate it, but I didn't really just fall in love with it either. And I hadn't played it in a long time, which is usually a good cue. It's the ones that you kind of find yourself coming back to over and over again. That's where you can really tell where something has really hooked you. So
Sure.
for me, that's Aces and Eights and Pendragon and The One Ring and obviously Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Excuse me. We're sort of kind of rambling a little bit.
Yeah.
So when you pick up a game like Aces and Ace and you're like, we'll give it a shot. It's, got a weird mechanic. Do you find yourself picking apart games when you're playing? As your design, can you get away from that designer's mentality and just play a game and enjoy it? Or are you forever like, oh, that's interesting, let me write that down because I may, want to use this later?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, not always 100. I can never like 100% pull away from doing that. Just because I spend so much time thinking about that stuff, sort of from a professional standpoint, that whatever I'm doing, I'm at some point, somewhere in my head, I'm kind of weighing odds, right, or weighing the math, or how where the decision points are, and all that stuff, and that's just kind of unconscious. But I mean, honestly, I do that when I'm watching movies too, so that shouldn't be any surprise. But yeah, but certainly the games that I love the most, that I love to play the most or run the most, are the ones where the kind of the conflicts, and the drama, what's happening for the characters is interesting and immersive and suspenseful enough that that it kind of pulls you out of thinking in terms of the game stuff to some extent, but not too far. It's kind of funny. I definitely like a good mix. I'm not really all that. I don't really greatly enjoy completely rules-free games or free-form games either. I like the kind of unpredictability that randomness brings, and the things, and the things that can represent at play. But yeah, so it's always fun, when you're in a game and what's happening at the table is kind of so interesting that you stop you stop thinking too mechanically about it, and you're just kind of responding to, oh geez, what's this going to mean? And when the dice have to come out, it's just a matter of the suspense of what's going to happen and how can I deal with this crisis. It's more than kind of adding up the numbers. Mm-hmm. That's what you want to shoot for me anyway.
Right. Well, and I think that's dependent a certain amount on the group, right? I mean, you can get those moments even in a super crunchy system like Rogue Trader.
Yeah, or Aces and Eights. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Aces and Eights is crunchy as hell, but it does what it sets out to do, for us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, we'll steer this back around a little bit to Delta Green.
Sure.
Congrats on the two Ennies. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great. That was really, really fun. I'm very proud and very relieved that I'm. It feels like a tradition that I have to live up to now that I'm kind of managing the Delta Green line, because as soon as we have one of these big books that comes out and doesn't collect an award like all the others did, then I'm going to feel that. It's going to be sad.
And that was one of the most successful RPG Kickstarters. You guys hit like 27 or 29 stretch goals or something like that. I mean, the whole
it did
stories
great.
And fiction, amazing.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it wasn't Monty Cook great, we got I'm always wary of bragging too hard, but yeah, for us, I mean, all the Kickstarters we've done, and we've been doing them since before Kickstarter was around, in the mid 2000s. We were one of the first companies that started doing that in the RPG space. So, but we've kind of picked and chosen our projects, and this was by far the most ambitious that we set out to do. And so, yeah, it knocked itself out of the park.
Now, do you think that that Kickstarter is like the new paradigm now for role-playing games and role-playing publishing companies to go to Kickstarter as a way to really sort of, I guess, not only judge, whether or not people want a product, but just, eliminating a lot of that, I guess, middleman, so to speak, or that front end, I guess, for you guys as a, you're not, Hasbro, WotC can just kind of put out whatever they want and whatever, they don't care. So for smaller companies, that's seems to be like the real wheelhouse now.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think it's accurate to say that even that a big company like Hasbro doesn't care as much as I think the way that they do things is so structured and ingrained that adopting a new kind of paradigm, like switching from their traditional method of deciding what to invest in and doing the research and figuring out if that's a good investment and then investing that money and then advertising it and selling it, all that old-fashioned stuff that you can do if you're drawing on a long history, of a successful company. It's kind of a leap for a company like that to jump onto Kickstarter. And also Kickstarter takes a cut, right? And so if you're Hasbro and you're breaking down the percentages, losing those extra few points off the top might make or break a line. So they're kind of working in a wholly different mode than small timers like me. But yeah, Kickstarter or crowdfunding has absolutely turned things around for us. I mean, not every single company is doing it and is interested in doing it, but more and more have been over the years, and it's become accepted and sort of standard enough that I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. And for us, it's too useful a tool for not just raising funds for production, but also engaging in ameliorating risk. So I mean, the old way of doing things 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had to think really long and hard. Were we going to create a game that was going to have full color art and be a hardback thing? And we had to decide that way ahead of time. And the only method that we really had in place to figure out if that was going to be feasible was setting a game up for pre-orders in retail. And over that sort of window, if enough retail orders came in, then that would tell you, okay, here's about what we can expect, and so therefore we can invest this much, and we all did that at the time, but it's nerve-wracking, and and if you guess wrong, then it can be catastrophic. So and that's why with Arc Dream, when we first started out in 2002, 2003, our publication schedule was just absolutely anemic, because we kind of started off with a couple of really small books for our game line Godlike, or World War II superhero action game, and but trying to, we did those, but then trying to kind of recoup the costs on those and then build up enough of a nest egg that we could then get some more ambitious. That's what we tried to do, was sort of spiral ourselves upward like that, and it's really tough. And so yeah, absolutely. The Kickstarter model has completely changed that whole dynamic and opened up a lot of possibilities that wouldn't have been there before, because there was just too much risk and too much at stake and too much uncertainty.
Sure.
Yeah.
Does it help to have an artist of Dennis's quality to be able to lean on him to do the art? I mean, I guess you're still paying him for the art, but it's not like you have to go out and find somebody and separate contract and.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly. And with Dennis is such a talented writer and artist both, that anything that we do that he has a direct hand in has a huge advantage. Not only because he's got such a stellar reputation and is so skillful, but he and I have worked together so closely for so many years that we can kind of we can really kind of accentuate all that. But yeah, absolutely, getting the right kind of art and the right design and putting the time and the money into those things is totally worth doing. I mean, not everybody does. So what's worthwhile for me is not going to be the case for everybody. But
Right.
I really can't stand putting out books that I feel like are slipshod, or that we didn't really do everything we could to make them as good as we possibly could. And so yeah, I'm always going to be looking for looking to make sure that what we have in illustrations in the books is using artists that I love and whose work I really admire.
Yeah, I mean, and he really knows the material, and the art just so
Sure.
reflects the tone of the narrative. It's just
with
creepy.
Delta Green. Yeah, with Delta Green, everything that we're doing in this new Delta Green line is going to be illustrated by Dennis. And it's a huge commitment on his part. But it was a decision that he made. Really, I didn't make that call for him, because I'm not going to say to him, hey, why don't you commit to doing 5 years worth of work in the next 2 years? But he felt really passionate about making sure that when we relaunched Delta Green the way we did, that it was going to really that we were going to give it as much punch as we could. And part of that was having that consistency with the look and feel of it, and it's sort of our lucky break that one of the creators of the property and one of the primary writers of the property is also an ingenious illustrator and can completely bring it together visually. So that's worked out really nicely.
So for like the 4 people on the planet who don't know what Delta Green is, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah. Delta Green is a role-playing game about modern-day investigators, usually like FBI agents or what have you, who find out about these horrible supernatural traumas and tragedies and crimes, and have to uncover them and investigate them and stop them from doing even more harm, and then do their best to cover them up so that they don't harm other people and other people don't follow the clues, and connect the dots and open the wound up all over again. And so it compares really naturally to the X-Files, because it first appeared and right about the same time as a little bit before the X-Files, and the X-Files became such a part of everybody's world, and featured FBI agents investigating weird things. But gameplay is a lot more like the Silence of the Lambs than it is like the X-Files. Right down to the supernatural antagonists, because Hannibal Lecter, while technically just a human being, is sort of such in those books and especially and in the movie both, is kind of such such a force of nature that he kind of, he's like an exception to the rules that govern other human beings. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Delta Green is very, it plays suspenseful, and it's kind of loaded with really hard choices and with kind of moral conflicts that the player characters have set before them, because their goal is to save lives, but just like surgeons may often have to destroy tissue in order to save other tissue, Delta Green agents are sometimes put in the position of deciding how much harm they're going to have to do in order to save everybody else from even worse harm. So it's not a happy game. It's not a, you know, it's not supposed to be a really cheerful game. And but like most horror games, you know, anytime I've played a horror game, there winds up being way more laughter around a table at a good horror game than any other game I've ever played.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always kind of rueful laughter. You know, it's kind of cop laughter. It's that kind of gallows humor and stress relief,
Right.
which is always a good sign, because that means that you've got the tension kind of ratcheted up enough that it's bothering people in some way that they can't quite identify. So Delta Green's really good at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I was looking through the agent's handbook, all the little, little vignettes, the like little action reports and stuff. It's so super. I know it's a dark game, but man, it's a dark game.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's kind of what we were here for. There are lots of role playing games you can play where you're playing the upright adventurers who are going to overcome by force of arms and show everybody what makes good and what makes evil. So we don't really have any need to do that again. You know, we have other priorities with Delta Green. It's much more about kind of bigger. I don't know. It's different themes. Let's just say that we're exploring.
Mm. Now, because it's a modern setting, in most horror games, it's sort of the isolation, is inherent to that sort of horror. So you take away the cell phones and you put them in a cabin in the woods, and the car doesn't start. Is it hard to sort of recreate that sort of aspect because it's a modern setting? The technology that's available, like they work for the government, so like, hey, we go to the green box and we get the RPG or the whatever. So that's not so much of a factor, I guess. It's more
with Delta Green, the way we've set it up and the way it plays, everything that you could bring to bear and think of as a resource, right, an asset, a source of strength, is also a source of vulnerability and potentially a threat. So, when I'm running Delta Green games, if the players decide they're going to go gear shopping, and they want to get the heaviest weaponry they possibly can, I'm all for it. I love that because the getting all of that stuff, and as a player, you tend to kind of go on this shopping spree, right, and start hitting all the black markets and wherever it is that you're going to buy rocket launchers and claymores and hand grenades and machine guns, and all these things that are going to make you feel invincible. The more they kind of do that, out of character, the players can kind of tell, right? If as the game master, I'm saying, yeah, that's fine, go get that. Yeah, you can get that. You're a federal agent. You know where to get machine guns. If you off the books, go for it. Make a bureaucracy roll, whatever. It's kind of funny because it sinks in really fast that that's not necessarily going to be the answer to all their problems. Machine guns can certainly help in some cases, and blowing things up is an option in some cases, and in some cases it just complicates matters hugely because, again, your characters are supposed to be covering this stuff up. They're supposed to be not drawing attention to themselves. And if your game turns into the next Branch Davidian compound, then you haven't done your job as a Delta Green agent. And communications is the same way. Cell phones and it's hilarious with Call of Cthulhu because of the sanity mechanic. And Delta Green is kind of a spin-off of Call of Cthulhu, and so we adapted the sanity rules from Call of Cthulhu and kind of adopted them to what makes Delta Green tick. But sanity is a resource that dwindles really fast with characters, and when you run out, when it runs too low or runs too low too fast, you can lose the ability to control your character's behavior, right? Because your character has a mental break. And so with Delta Green games and Call of Cthulhu games both, there's this really hilarious kind of dynamic where and hilarious to me as the game master anyway, but dynamic where the players spend so much time investigating and uncovering clues and digging and finding out what happened until they get to the point where they actually have to see what happened, and then all of a sudden nobody wants to know, right? Nobody like, I don't want to look at it. I'm not going to look. No, I didn't say I was looking in the corner, and and so absolutely, like, cell phones and communications are just another tool that's there. From my perspective as a game master, you can use those to kind of facilitate keeping the characters aware of each other's traumas and keeping them aware of the things that are out there to threaten them once they start reinforcing each other, once they come back together. And it's also, again, it's another source of publicity, right? You've got to make sure that people don't find out what you've been up to. So if you spend all your time, on your phone talking about it, then you're just going to expose more of what you've done to more people.
Sure. And the isolation in this is more of a personal isolation. You can't relate to things to your wife. You can't enjoy the time that you spend with your kid. You're just, completely isolated unto yourself, and even within your cell necessarily, because you don't talk about Delta Green. It's like Fight Club.
Right. Yeah, everything is secret and everything's compartmentalized because you don't want people to learn more of this poison, this kind of mental poison that you're all trying to deal with. Absolutely. And the game rules address that really explicitly, where in addition to your sort of sanity points that dictate how your character is dealing with the universe, we detail characters' bonds with, usually it's with non-player characters, but your family, your best friends, whoever it is that you sort of immediately rely on most powerfully, and those can fall apart in the course of gameplay, and then that gets explored sort of between game sessions, where you can use that time to improve your character, but you also have to see exactly what it meant when you lost all those points off of that bond with, little Timmy back home.
Right. Now, are bonds a new mechanic for this new edition, or did you have that in the previous edition as well?
No, I don't think we did. We had, there was, in one of our books called Targets of Opportunity, if I'm remembering right, it was in Targets of Opportunity. I wrote a thing about, I wrote like an optional set of rules for dealing with PTSD and dealing with stress disorders. And some of that research made it into the new game. But bonds proper were totally new for the Delta Green role-playing game, if I'm remembering right. I may be overlooking something, but I think they were totally new to this, because they went through a couple of iterations where of like how we were approaching things, but we finally settled on bonds with your fellow human beings as the most important kind of powerful thing that you have to lose besides your own health and personal sanity.
Mm. It mimics a little bit of the gumshoe, the sources of stability.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of a similar mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was, and yeah, I'm not ashamed at all to say that was a motivator or an inspiration in some way. And essentially, mechanically, it's kind of similar. Where bonds, what they do is you can rely on them to protect yourself from losing sanity points, but they also wear off, and they don't come back easily unless you go to a lot of trouble to try to repair them later. And so yeah, the way that with Trail, the way Trail handled pillars of stability and all of that, was kind of an interesting. It was a really, really cool set of mechanics to make the sanity rules in Trail of Cthulhu kind of dynamic and make them feel like they were kind of hitting home, but without being based on the percentile system of Call of Cthulhu. So we kind of went the other direction, where we stayed with the percentile system from Call of Cthulhu, but then wanted to bring in a couple of extra wrinkles to reflect what's happening with your characters outside the game.
Mm-hmm. And we're dancing around stability and sanity and all this stuff. So you'd mentioned a little bit earlier that you've, sort of modified the sanity rules. So for, like in Call of Cthulhu, it's like, oh my God, you're crazy. You lost 5 points in an hour or whatever. And, you've got this sudden break with reality, where in Delta Green, it's more of a, PTSD scenario where it's a slow, gradual decline.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the rules in Call of Cthulhu have kind of changed over the recently between 6th edition rules and the new 7th edition rules. The sanity rules have changed a little bit, but 6th edition and going back before that, most of the editions before that had the same basic idea, which was that if you lose, say, 5 points of 5 sanity points at a go, then you're going to have a really big immediate freak out. And then if you lose a larger number, like 1/5 of your score or whatever, within an hour or whatever the time period was, a little more extended time period, then you'll pick up an indefinite insanity, like a mental disorder that'll stay with you. It won't just be this sort of immediate thing and then you're more or less back to normal. It was something that'll linger. And 7th edition, if I'm remembering right, 7th edition, it's kind of conflated those just for simplicity's sake. So if you lose enough to kind of have that huge freak out, then you'll probably retain some big disorder that'll stay with you later. And so the way Delta Green kind of went another direction with adapting the old rules, where you could have the immediate freak out if you lose 5 points. But the bigger danger, as you said, is if you lose enough points over time, then you'll hit the breaking point, which is like literally the sanity point on your character sheet at which you're going to have a breakdown, and you'll pick up a mental disorder. And it's kind of this inexorable slide down to your next disorder. And then you just have to kind of do that over and over again, approach as you get whittled down to 0. And at 0, of course, your character's totally insane and out of your control.
Mm-hmm.
So if you keep playing a character kind of through that much trauma, then it'll make a lot of sense that your character's gone totally around the bend and irretrievably insane, because you'll have seen him or her become a basket case in so many ways along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really fun the way it plays out, because you do have that ongoing, I don't know, despair of seeing exactly what's coming and feeling your character kind of starting to break down, over time before your eyes. So it does a really good job, and I'm very happy with it. And it's brutal. Yeah, if you're not into that kind of thing, be warned. This is what the game's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When the original edition came out, did you get any pushback from the Call of Cthulhu players? Like, wait a minute, this is not 1920. This can't be Cthulhu. What are you doing?
No, I don't think so. I mean, that was a while ago, so I don't remember if there really was. But pardon me, Chaosium had done modern day Call of Cthulhu books themselves before Delta Green first came out in the late 90s. They did 1 or 2 campaigns and a collection of adventures and a book called Cthulhu Now and a 90s investigator's handbook. They did several things for the modern day. I mean, their main focus remained the sort of classic era, the 1920s, but it's not like it was something that was totally strange to everyone. So when it first came out, I mean, the people that weren't interested in playing Delta Green may not have been interested in a modern day Call of Cthulhu game anyway, right? Because they'd already seen it happen and that wasn't their thing. And there were some people that there were some people that looked at it and sort of had this gut reaction that if you're playing federal agents and special forces and these kind of highly trained, highly competent people, then the game won't be as suspenseful and as fun. And that's one that you really can't overcome except through experience and except by them actually playing the characters and seeing, oh geez, this just makes it even worse because look how good this character is, and even this badass is completely on the edge of falling apart.
All right. Is the new edition compatible with Call of Cthulhu and previous versions of Delta Green?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. That was one of our touchstones in development. Was we've had more than 20 years now of Delta Green material that's been published, and we absolutely did not want to just throw all of that away, or make people feel like, okay, we're just starting over, so give us your money, please, because we're going to do all of that over again. We wanted, I mean, and honestly, the reason we've been doing that for 20 years is because we love that game and we love the way it plays, and so we didn't really have any strong, desire to completely reinvent the wheel. In such a way that all of the previous Delta Green projects wouldn't be any good anymore, because we love the way that plays. That's why we've been playing it for so long. So yeah, the new rules, I mean, the Delta Green RPG rules are they're a little different in the details from 6th edition and previous Call of Cthulhu and from 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, but they're eminently convertible. Like, you could take a stat block from the first Delta Green thing, Convergence in 1992 from the Unspeakable Oath, and play it in the new rules, and you wouldn't have to do much thinking about which skill is which, or how does this operate, because they're fundamentally running off of the same engine. So yeah, they're totally compatible. That was something we kind of really, really worked hard to make sure that was going to be the case. Like, every time in developing the new rules, if we would come up on something where a solution felt like, well, geez, maybe we just need to not do a percentile rules engine and do something else, then it's like, no, come on, we're not going to go that direction.
Right. Well, I'm sure everybody's happy about that.
Yeah, I think so.
So sci-fi has always been sort of a venue for social commentary and stuff. Is that something that you were trying to tap into with Delta Green? War on Terror and all these different themes and stuff that are sort of running through. Was that intentional?
A little bit. I don't know how intentional it was as far as science fiction goes, but it's. I mean, Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft in the 1920s and 30s and teens, when he was doing his earliest work, was he was kind of writing some stories that he was writing as fantasy because he loved Lord Dunsany so much, and then he was writing a lot of stories that were just kind of that were sort of cosmic terror via science fiction, right? It was exploring the universe in some way, or kind of exploring the implications of things that he'd learned about astronomy, or about physics or geology, and taking those to sort of heightened levels. And so for us, there's no getting around that. So a lot of the Delta Green material has kind of been informed by science fiction in some way or another. But you know, I think, but we're not really, we didn't really set out to do it as a science fiction game as much as science fiction as a genre tends to respond to current events, you know, the current events of when it's being written, um, and so do we, and so does Delta Green. Um, and it was kind of interesting because as we're developing the new, you know, the new rules set, for a while we had a lot of people who were so accustomed to the 1990s Delta Green, the sort of classic books that came out, Delta Green and Countdown, that just took everybody's imaginations by storm. I mean, we did a couple of books in the 2000s as well, Eyes Only and Targets of Opportunity, but they were kind of following off of those first books. So there were a lot of people that kind of were thinking, well, that felt like Delta Green was such a kind of product of the 90s that they didn't think it was going to really have much resonance for the modern day. And as we were developing it, you know, I could only just shake my head because it's completely the opposite. You know, I mean, we live in a world where we're constantly surrounded by weird surveillance, you know, and Big Brother and threats of terrorism that may or may not be spurious, but we all have to be afraid of them all the time, no matter what the odds are. And so we're sort of constantly inundated with these issues that are just absolutely in Delta Green's wheelhouse. I mean, it's far more relevant today than it ever was back when it first came out.
Mm-hmm. Sure. All right. I'm scrolling through questions.
Sure.
I think I saw online as I was researching. Well, you guys have a card game in the works?
Yeah. It's kind of, I think it's kind of on hold right now. But Dennis and I have been batting around a couple of things. One that's not related to Delta Green at all. It's more of a goofy comedy game about the great old ones. And then but then we have a game that we were batting around with Greg Stoltze called Zero Sum, which is a Delta Green card game about where you're. I think the idea was the last version of it that we were kind of trading around. The idea was that each player is playing a Delta Green like case officer, right? Who's running a team, and you draw cards that represent either threats or assets you can use to address a threat, or complications that'll connect threats together or cancel out the assets that you're putting down. And your goal is to, as you're putting these things down, your goal is to kind of connect the threats around in such a way that they just totally connect up into each other in a loop and cannot be connected to anything else. And once that happens, you just take that off the table and you've won the game. But it's really hard to do that because there are so many complications that can come up that can. So that was sort of the idea behind it, and we haven't finished it by a long shot. But yeah, it's called Zero Sum because for, I guess, obvious reasons.
Sure. And so, in addition to the role-playing game, you guys also have Fiction Line as well. Sure.
Yeah. We've been publishing fiction for Delta Green since the very, very beginning. When DeltaGreen.com, the website, first went online, one of the things it had was short stories by John Tynes and Dennis Detweller and Scott Glancy that were sort of about Delta Green and about the way that the fictional conspiracy operated and about the threats that it faced and the kind of price that its people paid for it to help people help sort of evoke what was going on at the game table, and that's just continued to this day. So there was really early on, they started doing short story collections, anthologies, and we've just continued that. So our most recent one was called Extraordinary Renditions, and that had stories by by Dennis and Scott and John and me and Greg and Cody Goodfellow and Laurel Halbany, kinds of really great people. It's a fantastic collection of fiction, and all very suitably kind of stark and dire. And yeah, so it's terrific. And then before that, we did Tales from Failed Anatomies, which was a collection of Dennis's short stories for Delta Green, the ones that he'd published in different places before, as well as a bunch of new ones. Did a book called Strange Authorities, which did the same thing with John's stories, collected his fiction for Delta Green all in one place. So yeah, it's fiction is kind of its own very different kind of challenge to when compared to to game design. So I haven't been focusing really hard on fiction lately because we've got our hands full with the RPG work, and it's kind of a different headspace. But we'll certainly get back to it before too long.
Will you be kickstarting any of the fiction work, or is that
maybe? Yeah, we don't. I don't have a firm plan for that yet, but we've done pretty well on Kickstarter. That's how we got Failed Anatomies and Extraordinary Renditions. Those were a Kickstarter. Actually, Extraordinary Renditions was sort of essentially an extended stretch goal from Tales from Failed Anatomies, because that book did so well on Kickstarter that we were able to get a lot of the stories done as really awesome, professionally produced audio book versions of the short stories, and also funded new stories that just became Extraordinary Renditions. So yeah, I'm sure we will at some point soon.
Right. Now you and Dennis are minding the ship, as it were, per Delta Green. But John Tynes was the originator behind that. Is that how the story goes? It was originally his baby.
Yeah. The first thing that was published for Delta Green was a scenario by John Tynes in The Unspeakable Oath, in issue number 6, I think, maybe 7. I think it was 7, in 1992. And that was basically the scenario Convergence kind of had an introduction saying the idea here, it's modern day, and the idea is you're playing these federal agents, and they're in this group called Delta Green, which is these sort of good old boys club, basically, of people that used to fight the supernatural for the government until they got shut down, and now they're just kind of doing it on their own. And so when that came out, I think Dennis did the illustrations for that in the Oath, if I remember right. But Scott wasn't part of the mix yet, and I certainly wasn't. I was just a fan. But when it came out, Scott read it. He was living in Florida at the time, I think, and I got it, and just like a whole lot of other people got it, and we just completely lost our minds. We thought it was so amazingly well conceived. And so they immediately kind of started developing it in earnest after that. I remember I went to law school right after that came out, so I was in New York in law school, keeping up with the announcements on America Online, and kind of reading the files that they put on AOL, and attending the AOL chat sessions and all of that to see what was going to be happening with it. So it was this sort of agonizing wait as they brought everything together. It took them whatever it did, 4 or 5 years, I think, to produce the first Delta Green book. And yeah, that seemed like an eternity back then, but it kind of set the stage, unfortunately, for people to be waiting endlessly for Delta Green material ever since.
Well, hey, books are shipping now, right? People should be getting their Kickstarter rewards and stuff.
Yes, we are working hard on it. So yeah, but yeah, so John started it, and once they started really working on it as a setting, Dennis came aboard and Scott Glancy came aboard, and between them, they wound up doing so much development on it that that officially they're sort of the three of them are co-founders of Delta Green, of the property, because the way it kind of wound up, there was really not any extracting, some of the material that one of them did from it, without everything else breaking down. Yeah. So, but where it started was with John's first scenario.
Cool. Is he still involved at all with you guys as far as a production of Delta Green, or no?
More as an advisor. He kind of he's I don't know. He's not really. I think he feels like he's kind of explored role playing games and as kind of as much as he could in the throughout the 90s. So he's been involved kind of behind the scenes in our long email conversations about what we were going to be doing with the game and what themes we wanted to hit, or which themes we wanted to kind of accentuate, and so he's been really useful in that capacity. But he's just been too busy to spend a lot of time writing for it. As much as I try to wheedle him and trick him into doing work, he steadfastly refuses it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have been able to get him to do a lot of work on Puppet Land, but Puppet Land's kind of a different animal. It's such a personal thing for him that that's sort of a whole different sphere.
Is the mechanics to that similar to Monsters and Other Childish Things?
Oh no, totally.
Or is it a completely different? Okay.
Yeah, totally different. No, Puppet Land is. Puppet Land has more in common with LARPing than it does with sort of traditional dice-based games. I mean, it's completely diceless for one thing, but even more than that, it depends. It just depends an awful lot on the game master, the puppet master's kind of sense of things and of what ought to happen or ought not to happen. And a huge part of the rules have to do not really with mechanical things or deciding what happens to the characters or whether they succeed or fail at different things, as much as how you present things. And so it's kind of built to create these kind of short stories that are told in this kind of children's book manner, but are generally about things that are really spooky and scary and potentially traumatic. So it's fascinating. So in the new edition, it originally came out as this really tiny. It originally came out as just a page on John's website, and then it was published in a magazine. And James Wallace's company Hogshead published a real slim, 18 or 20 page version of it. So yeah, the new edition, we've added a lot of material to it, and then also gotten some fantastic art by Samuel Araya and Heather Hudson and Holly Mingert to go in it. So it's an absolute work of beauty.
Cool. Yeah, I did see the tweets and stuff that it was being released, but I didn't really know too much about it.
Yeah. It's its own animal, and and it's such a different thing from Delta Green or anything else we'd publish, that it's really interesting. So I encourage people to check it out. You're playing the role of puppets in this world that was once completely idyllic and magical and wonderful until the maker of puppets was murdered, and now the tyrant Punch controls everything and has everybody under his thumb and under the heels of his jackbooted nutcrackers. And so you're kind of playing this resistance movement of helpless puppets trying to make the world better.
Cool, interesting. Well, we'll have to make sure we throw that in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. So it's at the presses right now. So I'm very excited. It's taken a long time to get it there.
Cool. All right. What do you feel is the appeal of Delta Green?
Oh, I think it's I mean, for one thing, it's a horror game first and foremost. So the people that really dig it, they tend to really dig it because it's so effective at evoking things that are scary and kind of awful, and engaging your imagination on big things. And also, as Delta Green specifically, what it does uniquely well is mix in all of that stuff with the real world and make it feel like you're seeing something that could actually happen out there somewhere. If you disregard the obviously supernatural, the slime monsters and all that stuff, where you're looking at things that kind of feel like they kind of make sense, or that you're sort of exploring permutations of real world developments and issues, and so it's very kind of grounded in that way, and that's what I certainly have always loved the most about it was the way that it felt like you were kind of exploring these horrors in the role of people that felt real and felt like they made sense, and that kind of made the horrors all the more scary.
Okay. Is it a game for everybody, do you think?
Oh, no, not at all. No, no. I mean, and I've run it for my a lot of my local friends, and they absolutely adore it and have a great time. But I've also run it for people that just were not into it at all, and didn't. Not everybody's into horror games, and that's okay. And this isn't, as I've said, Delta Green is there's nothing all that ironic about it. It's not trying to be kind of a tongue-in-cheek horror game. It's not trying to be like it's cute Cthulhu, or anything like that. And so if you're not into games that are all about really difficult moral choices, then it's not going to be your thing. And there are plenty of gamers that aren't into that stuff, and that's totally cool. That's great. I'm great friends with some of them. And when I'm on panels with them and we start talking about our favorite games, I'll talk about Delta Green, and they'll kind of shake their heads and say, I just don't understand you. And they'll talk about Rifts or whatever, and I'll shake my head and say, I just don't get it, and we all live together happily.
Sure. How did you get into the industry to start with?
Oh, just as a volunteer and a fan. When it was really, well, let's say when in the early days of the Oath, the Unspeakable Oath, our magazine that we relaunched a few years ago, but on the very early days of it, I started corresponding with the guys that were behind it, and offered to help do playtesting and proofreading, and did a lot of that. And then when the World Wide Web became a thing, then I think where it really took off was I had put together a fan website about Delta Green, because I was running a campaign through IRC. It was an internet, like a text chat campaign.
Right.
And I'd put together a fan website for it, and it was as 1990s fan websites go, it was okay, but
Right.
But the main thing is John and Dennis and the gang kind of were paying attention, to who was doing stuff with their work online. And basically John's attitude was he felt like I kind of got what they were going for in a way that some people did and some people didn't. So he asked if I wanted to help just help run the Delta Green official website, and so I started doing that, and then just kind of started doing more and more. So I was involved with the projects a little bit from then, and then did the same sort of thing, running a website for Hobgoblin Press when they launched. They eventually, these days they're EOS Sama, but back then they were Hobgoblin Press. And Dennis and Greg did a game called Godlike through them, and so they essentially had a parting of the ways. And so when that happened, Dennis and I talked it over and decided to just kick things off and see if we could run Godlike ourselves. So we set up ArcDream to do that, sort of our venue for publishing Godlike and publishing new material for Godlike. And so that's where it started in earnest. So it's sort of, for me, it's bounced back and forth between working full-time on it and part-time on it. But since Delta Green hit the rafters last year, I'm certainly full time now, and then some.
Sure. And you guys also published Monsters and Other Childish Things, which was a supplement originally for Godlike.
Yeah, it was sort of a spinoff of a spinoff. Godlike begat Wild Talents, which was like, it used the core engine of Godlike, of this sort of World War II superheroes game, but set it up so that you could play it in a lot of different settings and genres, and you could kind of tweak the rules a little more easily to fit the play style you wanted. And so people got really creative with the things they started doing with it. And one of the things that happened with Wild, that was developed for Wild Talents I think it was on an RPGNet thread, was Benjamin Baugh did this Wild Talents idea of you're playing these talents who are just little kids whose power is to sort of project this weird invisible monster that has crazy powers. And so you can just sort of have your monsters fight with each other or do things. And that was kind of the kernel of it. And so, yeah, it sort of, Monsters kind of spun off from Wild Talents in a similar way that Wild Talents spun off from from Godlike. Yeah.
Sure. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. When did you first discover Lovecraft?
Oh, it would have been 1981, maybe 82. I mean, basically, it was just it was like a lot of people, it was out of Appendix N of the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide from AD&D, and I kind of started going down the list of, well, I love and adore this thing like I've never loved and adored anything in my life. So where did it start? So I started reading what was on that list that Gary Gygax did for his recommended reading, I think I devoured everything I could of Michael Moorcock first, and then because it was a little more accessible, but then started reading Lovecraft and just thought it was really weird and kind of cool. And then Call of Cthulhu came out, the game, and that's what really did it. Just playing that for the first time when I was, whatever, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old, with my best friend. And we just absolutely loved it, because by then we were totally jaded D&D players, because we'd been playing D&D for like 2, maybe 3 whole years at that point, right? So we were completely over dungeon crawls, and wanted something new. So yeah, so Call of Cthulhu was just like a revelation. It was it felt so risky and suspenseful and hard to control. It was just amazing. so yeah, and as soon as that happened, I started just reading everything I could of H.P. Lovecraft because I became motivated at that point. I had to know what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Do you still read a lot of weird fiction?
Yeah, not all the time. I've got a couple of Charles Stross books that I stacked up that I've picked up, but I haven't actually read yet. But honestly, most of my time that I spend reading, I spend so much time reading for research that I hardly ever actually read fiction these days, which is kind of saddening because I love it. But and then when I do go in if I find something new that I'm really into for fiction, it's often like totally unrelated to most of what I do, day by day, just because I need kind of, your brain needs different kinds of food at different times, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
my favorite, even still, my favorite author of all time, is not Lovecraft, but Patrick O'Brian. The Master and Commander series of novels just absolutely dropped me to the floor. I could read those over and over and over without a stop. And Larry McMurtry's Lonesome Dove is just an amazing novel. That's one of my single favorite individual novels of all time. And the TV series, the miniseries for that, kind of left me cold, when I saw that, because I saw that after I read the book.
Right.
And I felt like, oh, geez, this is just it looks pretty made for TV, and the book is just really, really involved and pulls no punches, So, but yeah, so I've got but yeah, I've got a pile of things I need to catch up on for the weird fiction. But yeah, I don't know. I've read my share.
Yeah, I find myself in the same boat. I love to read and just never have the time to actually pick up anything and get through it. I'd started going through all the classics, I don't know, last year or the year before, and I made some pretty good progress, and then things started to pick up with the website. It's like, okay, not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's, research and reviews and, reading RPGs and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you said you were, way back in the early days of D&D. What's your favorite RPG?
Oh, well, I mean, Delta Green, obviously.
Yep.
But beyond that, it would be Call of Cthulhu, which is almost equally obvious because I run the Unspeakable Oath and I've spent all this time writing in it, right? But and that's why Delta Green is my favorite, is because with Delta Green we essentially took took Call of Cthulhu and then made it fit us, right? And fit the way we kind of do things and optimized it for the way Delta Green works. And so yeah, and so that's I mean, I essentially had the privilege of making my favorite game from scratch and making sure that it would be my favorite, with a lot of help from Dennis and Greg in that regard, because Greg had a lot of really amazing ideas that wound up in the game, and Dennis had a very clean kind of vision for the way the game ought to play in detail and not play in detail. And so Dennis and I spent years kind of batting ideas back and forth and just wrangling them and arguing over them endlessly until we kind of were able to whittle them down into a way that made sense, and that played fast and clean and didn't get clogged up. So it was a really hard process, but I absolutely adore what we wound up with. So, but outside of Delta Green and Call of Cthulhu, which are kind of gimmies, oh gosh, there's also a gimme is the whole basic role playing line I've really enjoyed, but that's all related to Call of Cthulhu, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, so then we'd be at Pendragon and the One Ring, and Aces and Eights, which all do sort of different things. And Pendragon and the One Ring are a little I mean, they're a little related. Pendragon is very closely related to the basic role-playing rules engine, even though it uses a D20 instead of percentile dice. So that's not really a huge shock, I guess, mechanically speaking. But Pendragon is so fantastic at it's such a great game for figuring out what it's trying to do and sticking to that and delivering that. And it went through phases over the years where it tried to become a little more of a kitchen sink game, where they kind of broadened up, okay, now you can play wizards now, because they had people writing in saying, I want to play a magic user, but eventually kind of figured out that that's not what the game's about. The game is about playing knights in this kind of quasi-historical setting that is not really all that historical, but it feels really historical when you're playing it. But it's also kind of swimming in Arthuriana. So, it's a work of genius. So, and the One Ring, in a similar way, the One Ring does a fantastic job of evoking a sense of Middle Earth. It's not like it's another rules engine that was kind of adapted for Tolkien, and kind of kludged together to so that you could play a Hobbit or whatever. It was built from the ground up to feel like what you were playing at the table belonged in a Tolkien story, and or at least in a really good Tolkien fan fiction. And it sort of hews really closely to the themes that Tolkien was exploring, was interested in, and to the historical sources that he was drawing from. So the experience has a lot of fidelity to it, and it doesn't feel like anything else.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you haven't had the opportunity to play that you would like to?
Honestly, I don't think so. I'm telling a lie. Because for a long time that was Privateers and Gentlemen, because I love the Age of Sail fiction, and I even, like, years ago, I got as a Christmas gift, like, an unopened box set of Privateers and Gentlemen from 1981, whenever that came out. But a couple of years ago, I finally got around to actually running that for my buddies, and we've had a fantastic time playing that. The one that I haven't played, that I still want to play at some point, is Dogs in the Vineyard, which came out ages ago. But for whatever reason, every time I get to a point where I'm thinking, hey, we ought to try Dogs, I'm going to try Dogs, it's like somebody's just not into it, or the timing didn't work out, or something crazy like that. So, so that's, so I think that's probably tops on my wish I could play the damn thing at some point. And we were even, like, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I remember we were at Gen Con, and Greg and I were tooling around after hours and ran into Vincent Baker, who wrote it. And Greg was like, hey, you want to run Dogs? And by that time, like, Vincent Baker had been running nothing but Dogs in the Vineyard for 5 years. And he just sort of rolled his eyes. He was like, oh, no. So I kind of felt like I was that close, but it wasn't to be. Someday.
Hey, you got to call Ross. I think they've run that before. You probably
have they really?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll see if I can get with Ross, get somebody over there to GM it. Let me sit in on one so I can knock that off my bucket list.
Right. Do you prefer to play, or do you prefer to GM?
Oh,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I would say historically I've kind of had more fun GMing games than playing. But that can vary, because it varies so much by who's running the game, right, and how into it they are, and what the game's about, right? So one of my, probably my among my kind of top favorite experiences in gaming was not as a GM but as a player, in the One Ring. When it first came out, my friend John was running it for me and our buddies, and I was a player character in that one, and just had absolutely the best time. I was playing a Hobbit. We were like, me and another friend of mine. We were playing Hobbit brothers who were, exploring Wilderland together, and it was just, it was just absolutely a blast. But everybody was kind of on the same page, and that's where we kind of discovered what really made that game tick. And it was just totally right up our alley. But other than that, most of my really fantastic experiences have been as a game master, kind of seeing what the players were going to bring to the table, and whether that's with Aces and Eights, where I tend to do a lot of research on the setting and on building the kind of the sandbox around the players, and setting up the conflicts that their characters are going to be coming into contact with, and seeing what happens with them, or with Delta Green, where it's not really about that as much as sort of building these encounters and making them as kind of awe-inspiring and frightening at the same time as you can manage, and then seeing how the players respond to it when they come into contact with those. Very different experiences, but those are those have usually been my favorite kinds of gaming.
Okay, and this is a more esoteric question, I guess. But what is it about gaming, do you think, that makes it so popular and ingrained? I mean, is it the camaraderie? Is it the escapism? What do you feel is the punch to gaming?
Yeah, well, I think the creativity is what makes it unique. Tabletop role playing is not. It's not storytelling, because storytelling is very singular. I mean, even if you're telling a story as part of a group or a circle or a round robin or something like that, the stories that are powerful are the stories that come from a single vision and a single mind, and so role playing isn't storytelling, but it's a way of kind of generating stories that you can think about and retell later, and kind of but experience them at the table. But it also can allow you to have the sort of structure that stories impose on reality, to generate narrative, to help give meaning to our experiences. You can get some of that in role-playing games, but at the same time, you don't know for sure that you're going to get that, because they feel so dynamic and unpredictable. So it's kind of, it's the being able to live in that kind of secondary life is just fantastic and fascinating, and it demands and encourages a level of creativity by people beforehand and afterward, and most importantly at the table itself, that I don't think you really see anywhere else. I don't think I've seen it anywhere else. So yeah, I think that's what makes me passionate about it, is it feels like it's an experience unlike any other, and I really love that kind of mix of creativity and exploring a new world, and exploring conflicts that that might have a lot of potency and meaning, but in a fictional way, so you can go home afterward.
Sure. Cool. Very interesting. Okay. So I'm out of questions, but I do have a thing at the end here we call the final five. I have 5 geeky / nerdy questions to throw at you. It's sort of a binary, but if you want to elaborate, that's certainly acceptable. You may be passionate about one or the other.
Okay.
So we'll kick this right off. It's Star Trek or Star Wars?
Oh, Star Wars with an awful lot of caveats.
Uh-oh. What does that mean? Well, all right. So none of the prequels. We got
1980,
that one.
1980s Star Wars and
Yeah. What?
1960s Star Trek. Those are sort of my jams.
Okay. Have you seen either of the new Star Treks or new Star Wars? How do
Oh
you
yeah,
feel about those?
sure,
Yeah.
sure, yeah, yeah. No, the newest Star Wars movie, I liked it okay. I mean, I had friends that were totally blown away by it, um, and but I liked it okay. I mean, it was compared to the prequels, it was a work of
Yeah.
staggering immortal genius. But that's kind of damning with faint praise. So I don't feel I feel like I'm kind of dissing J.J. Abrams by even making that comparison.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it was okay. It was good. It wasn't an Empire Strikes Back, but it was okay.
Yeah. Well, it's the third retelling of,
Right.
of the Death Star trilogy.
Hmm.
But yeah, and it was okay.
Yeah.
This is probably a no-brainer, but tabletop or video games?
Yeah, tabletop. Yeah.
Yeah. I should have asked a different one.
Yeah, I mean, and the video games that I really dig are the ones that are that kind of evoke something about the things I love about tabletop gaming. So, I played XCOM I played the original version of XCOM back in the '90s until my wife was about to leave me, and then the new version of XCOM that came out a couple of years ago, just endlessly, endlessly, endlessly. And by that time, she was so used to everything, she wasn't going to leave me. And what? Oh God, Red Dead Redemption. I mean, I could still pick up Red Dead Redemption and play it for weeks, even knowing exactly how the broader storyline is going to go. But so those are games that I completely get hooked into. But a lot of video games just feel a little, I don't know, they feel kind of shallow when I'm playing them, at least to me. Which, again, that's just me. So take that with a huge grain of salt.
Sure, sure. DC or Marvel?
Yeah, Marvel. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't say that with a lot of ownership, because other than I love the movies, the new line of Marvel movies, but up until that, I hadn't had a lot of exposure to Marvel. I've sort of dipped into the comics occasionally over the years. So when Alias first came out, the Jessica Jones comic, or not, you know what? No, I didn't read it when it first came out. I read it when it came out in a graphic novel. But Joss Whedon did a run on a book called The Astonishing X-Men, where they launched the book for him to write the first 12 issues, and and I adored those. But I don't know, I felt like I got kind of burned on comic books early on. And once I sort of figured out that I'd been reading comics for several years as a teenager, and once I figured out how disposable the storylines were,
Yeah.
and how ultimately kind of long-term meaningless they were, that they were just there to be drawn back on as soon as somebody needed to revisit a character. They lost an awful lot of charm for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always Marvel comics that I was reading. So the early '80s was I was just a complete X-Men fanatic in the early Claremont years of the X-Men.
Okay.
And DC, I don't know, I never read an awful lot of DC, and most of what I read kind of left me, I don't know, nothing that I read really grabbed me, except for, I don't know, Miller's Dark Knight Returns, grabbed me the way it grabbed everybody else in the universe, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll say Marvel.
Yeah. Batman's really the only thing that DC's got going on. I mean, you got the dark, gritty, unless you're doing, I guess Detective Comics is a little bit lighter, but yeah, I mean, it's just, monster of the week, the world is going to explode tomorrow, and the next week the moon's going to explode. It's
Yeah.
Sci-fi or fantasy?
Um, Overall sci-fi, but my very favorite stories usually are fantasy stories, but you know, I mean, it's kind of like with westerns. Like I hate most westerns except for the ones that are my favorite things ever. You know,
Mhm.
most fantasy, I couldn't read more than a couple of pages of it. But you know, I'm absolutely adore Tolkien, like almost no other writer, and and I love Joe Abercrombie's fantasy stories, and Glenn Cook's Black Company stories have been some of my favorite things for 30 years now, right? So, but it's kind of tough. I'm always a little reluctant to say I'm a big fan of fantasy because I don't want people to think that means I love all the I love all of it, because most of it I just don't. But yeah, the George R. The Song of Ice and Fire I love as well. So yeah.
Cool. And if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Oh, um, probably I would probably love to be able to fly, because number one, I imagine it would burn so much energy that I would lose all this weight really fast and be svelte and healthy again without having to work too hard. And number two, I could use it to overcome the vertigo and fear of heights that I've had to struggle with since I was a kid.
Yeah, I have a fear of heights too. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's not horrible for me. I just there was when I was little, my father I was visiting here in Birmingham. I was living in California at the time, but I visited here in Birmingham, and my father took me to the racetrack, to Talladega, and there wasn't a big race there going on. He just knew some guys that worked there. So we went out and kind of walked around the track, and he loved cars, and I had no use for cars because I was a D&D kid. But
Right.
um, but at one point, like, we walked up to the top of the track, and those tracks, I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're amazingly steep. Like, and they have to be, because the cars are so fast. If they weren't, the cars would be flying all over the place, right? So they're at this really steep incline, and so we climbed up to the top of that, and then I looked down, and it was like looking off the ledge of a building or something, and I just like froze the hell up and absolutely humiliated my father, because all of his macho, driving instructor guys were all there, that he was like, this is my useless son. So yeah, it's those proud moments linger with you, I guess.
Cherished childhood memories.
That's right. Yeah.
We went to Gettysburg. They used to have those metal not watchtowers, but freestanding like observation towers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe there were only 2, maybe 3 stories. I got up the first landing and started up the second set of steps, and the kids were running up and down, and the thing is shaking. I just sat down. I said, I can't do it. I know it's not going to fall down. I know it's that high. I can't do it. I'm going back down.
Yeah. It's not so bad for me these days. We went to back to New York City a couple of months ago for the first time in 20 years, I guess. But anyway, yeah, we went up. We took the kids up to the top of Empire State Building and looked around. So the only way that would like really wig my brain out is if I like leaned over like and looked right and looked directly down, then everything freaks out. But most of the time it was okay. I'm all right. You don't have to worry. I'm doing okay.
Well, that's good. We're glad to hear it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I have. I want to thank you for coming on. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
Congratulations on all the huge success for Delta Green.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you want to give out all of the contact details, websites, Twitter, and all that jazz, we want to go ahead and throw that out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Delta Green is at deltagreen.com. It's with or without a hyphen in the middle. It has a Twitter feed at Delta Green RPG. I'm at Shane Ivey. I'm active on Facebook. We have Facebook pages for Delta Green, and my personal page, and the company page, and all kinds of pages. And then there's on deltagreen.com you can find links to the Delta Green mailing list, which is a Yahoo group, but that you can subscribe to, that has daily conversations and discussions about Delta Green and about scenarios and inspirations for it. That's really, really useful. And on Facebook, there's a Delta Green RPG Street Team. It's like a private group, but you can, if you can find the link, I think the link to that's on the Delta Green website as well. That if you're on Facebook, I encourage you to join that, because they have a lot of good ideas floating around as well. And then our main thing is and the Unspeakable Oath, the magazine, which is a couple of years out of date now, but we're about to go into production on a new issue at long last, is at theunspeakableoath.com. And so we have like our at Gen Con, we recorded a couple of seminars and some live games and things that we've posted as part of the podcast feed for the Unspeakable Oath. And then the main website is arcdream.com, ARCDREAM.
Cool. And if you guys didn't write all that stuff down, I will be furiously typing away show notes, and we'll get all that stuff in there. We'll also be releasing this as an audio-only MP3, although if you've made it this far, I guess that's kind of a moot point, but if you want to save it for later and throw it on your device, that's fantastic. I'm going to throw all of our details out as well. You can find us at legendsoftabletop.com. Any questions, comments, or feedback, you can hit us up at legendsoftabletop@gmail.com. Check out all of our game pictures and such on Instagram. There's a Facebook page. We're on Twitter at Legends Tabletop. There's no "of" in it. So we appreciate you checking all that stuff out. If you could leave us rating review on iTunes, that would be fantastic. That's immensely helpful to bump the podcast up in the rankings there, gives it more visibility. So we appreciate that. And there's a Tumblr and there's a Twitch channel, which is not doing anything at the moment, but look in the future. Tomorrow evening, Leah is going to be interviewing Jim Pinto, who has a current Kickstarter for something I did not write down. Throw that in the show notes. And on Thursday, we'll have something a little bit different. I'm going to be interviewing musician Jack Williams. He's a folky singer-songwriter kind of guy. I've known Jack for like 25 years or so. So I'm going to have him on Thursday afternoon. So we've got 3 huge interviews for this week. So we appreciate you coming back and checking those out as well. Again, they'll be released as audio MP3 podcasts later on. So you can always go back and download them. So we appreciate that. So I want to thank you again for coming on, Shane. It was a lot of fun to get a chance to talk to you.
Yeah, super. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
If I can get you to say before you cut me loose, and you're listening to Legends of Tabletop.
And you're listening to Legends of Tabletop.
Fantastic. I'm going to edit that back into the front end so I can complete that bumper out. But again, thank you for coming on. Next time you've got Kickstarter, any news kind of stuff, feel free to hit me up. We'd love to have you on again. Help to promote whatever it is that you've got going on.
Yeah, super. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, sir. And I'm going to close this out and catch you guys next time.
Thanks.